Hi, and welcome back to the Optimized Career Solutions YouTube channel. This is the month of October, and in October, we are focusing on interviews. So, if you are in a job search or if you are thinking you might be in an interview in any time in the near future, make sure that you are paying attention and make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel so that you can be informed when we drop new videos such as the video portion of our Career Advancement Academy podcast, where Jack, my husband and co-owner of Optimized Career Solutions, and other executive career coach, we get on and we every week provide some really actionable tips, strategies, and value for advancing your career, whether you're in a job search or not. And every week on Thursdays, I drop a full-length video providing supplemental advice, tips, and strategies to make sure that you are advancing in your career or job search. And like I said, this month in October, we are focusing all on interviews. So yesterday, Jack and we talked about the recruiter interview. So if you are potentially in a job search, you have undoubtedly discussed, had a conversation, or have faced a recruiter at some point in your job search. And today, what we're going to be talking about is what to do in that recruiter interview to maximize your chances of landing that second interview with a hiring manager. What's really exciting is yesterday, Jack and I dropped a podcast and YouTube video episode to talk about how to secure recruiter interviews and how to navigate LinkedIn, the job boards, all that other good stuff to make sure that you are sitting in that seat with that recruiter so that you can advocate for yourself and get to that next step. But today in this video, we're going to talk about maximizing your time with that recruiter so that instead of viewing that recruiter interview as potentially another obstacle in this hiring process, you can view it as an opportunity. So let's go ahead and dive in to the recruiter interview. I want to make sure that you are focused on your mindset when it goes into this interview with a recruiter, this discussion. First and foremost, a lot of times job seekers, professionals, leaders, high achievers, if you've been in a job search for a while, you've probably been feeling a little bit frustrated. You've probably been feeling a little bit uneasy about getting into another conversation with a recruiter because you've been around or through the ringer when it comes to applying to jobs over and over again. And so if you are struggling with landing some of these interviews, I highly recommend check out one of our older videos where we talk about the traditional and the strategic job search methods, the two differences between them, and then how to have a hybrid job search so that you can maximize your opportunities and land more interviews. But now you're in that recruiter interview or you've landed one and you want to make sure that you're maximizing your time with them. So let's make sure that first and foremost, you know what some of the common questions that are going to be asked in that interview and some questions that you can ask to maximize your time and what the mindset of that recruiter is. A little bit of my background, I was this corporate recruiter. I was a senior recruiter. I helped train other recruiters and I worked in human resources. I'm actually SPHR certified, which is Senior Professional in Human Resources. I had to take a big scary test and I passed and I have to keep my certification active. So why am I telling you this? It's because I've sat in that seat as a recruiter and I'm going to tell you all of my best insider tips from working, training other recruiters, being a recruiter and implementing an applicant tracking system and doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recruiter screens and interviews. What is that recruiter really wanting from you in that interview? Well, let's get in the mind of a recruiter. A recruiter, first and foremost, they are recruiting for upwards of 20 to 30 different jobs at any given time. So there's a lot of different people that they're talking to, jobs that they're looking at. And the best piece of advice that I can give you right now is that recruiters are really good at recruiting, and they're not really great at knowing the nitty-gritty details of the job that they're hiring for and the value and impact that you can bring. They're not going to be a technical product manager with 20 years of experience like you are. They're going to be a recruiter. And so, what are they going to be most focused on? They're going to be most focused on, do you have the general skills and experience to do that job? Are you going to meet the company culture? Are you going to fit in with the company, right? Do you have the same values that the company really values as well? Are you going to fit in with the team? And do you basically meet the general requirements of the job so that you can be passed on to that hiring manager, and we can take this huge pile of resumes, narrow it down to just a few so that that hiring manager doesn't have to do that, right? So that's what the recruiter is looking for. What they're going to know is they're going to know a lot about the company. They're going to know a little bit of the team dynamics. They're going to know a general overview of the role, but they're not going to know specifics of the role. So with that in mind, that's going to help you inform the questions that you're going to ask and the way that you're going to answer some of the questions, right? The types of questions that you're probably going to be asked, a lot more behavioral questions and situational questions, not necessarily technical questions or specific questions about the types of things that you're going to be doing in that role. So if you are struggling with how do I answer these questions, I highly recommend check out last week's video where we talk about the STAR method, right? Where you can answer questions to interviews in a framework to help alleviate some of that mental load of, ooh, what do I say, right? So definitely check out the STAR method. Some of the top questions that you're most likely going to be asked in a recruiter interview are going to be, tell me about yourself, right? Last week on the pod, Career Advancement Academy podcast, we talked about the elevator pitch to answer the tell me about yourself question. So really having a rock solid, concise elevator pitch that really talks about who you are at a high level, a specific accomplishment that talks about how you can execute that job really well, and then why you're excited to be talking to someone at that company is going to help set you apart because it showcases excitement for being in that job. It showcases an overarching reason as to why you're qualified and why you should be in that call and in that hiring process, but it's not going to overwhelm that recruiter with too many details about your job that maybe they don't understand, right? So it's going to be short, concise. You're going to keep their attention and you're going to move on to other questions. A couple other questions that they might have for you is walk me through your resume. As much as I do not love this question, you might want to be prepared with having one sentence highlight for the types of positions that you've been in throughout your career. Especially if you have a 10, 15, 20-year career, you're going to want to make sure that you keep this answer to no more than about 2 minutes because they're looking at your resume, right? And what they're asking is they're probably saying, hey, please give me a quick overview because this resume is dense and I need to make sure that you're skilled and experienced and I can move you on to the hiring manager. So what I highly recommend is if you have that job description or you know what role you're going after and you have your resume, really just highlight, this is what I did at the beginning of my career that set me up for success for the rest of my career. And now after going through these types of different companies, I lead teams to do this, which I believe sets me up to be a perfect fit for this type of role because from what I understand, you're looking for X, Y, and Z. And then you can always turn around, could you tell me a little bit more about what you all are looking for in this role, right? They're going to also probably ask you what your goal for the next role is in your career. This is where if you have a job description that you're in that interview for, you're going to want to really tailor your goal to align your skills with what they're looking for in that job description. If you don't have a job description, you don't know what you are talking to them about. If this is just an informational interview, then I highly recommend being very crystal clear as to what you want next in your career without just saying anything like, well, I can do anything. Because If they don't have a clear path for you or a clear idea of where they can fit you, they're going to put you in a pile that says too ambiguous. I don't know where to put them. I'm going to focus on people where I know exactly where to put them. So that's going to be my advice to you is if you're in an informational interview with a recruiter or a headhunter where they say, what are you really looking for? Be very crystal clear. Say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I focus on. Here's how I've been successful. And this is the type of role that I'm going after. Okay. The next type of question that they're going to probably ask is, why are you looking to leave your current role? Now, this is going to be a tricky question, but here's the reason why they're asking. They want to know, hey, are you leaving because of a specific reason? That is a red flag, right? And a red flag to a recruiter is going to be if you badmouth your current or old company, because they're thinking in their mind, if you badmouth them, you're going to badmouth us if things go wrong with us for some reason, right? And they also kind of want to know what your part in it is too, right? And so what I tell my clients and what I'm going to tell you is keep it short, be honest, but keep it short, and you don't have to spill the whole beans, right? So you can truly say, hey, I've spent a really great amount of time at this company that I'm at right now. And after doing X, Y, and Z, what I've realized is that leadership changed and they're moving their direction towards something that is no longer aligned with what I'm looking for in my career, which is why I'm really excited to be talking to you, because I've read the job description. It looks like it's perfectly aligned not only with my skills and experience, but where I'm headed in my personal and professional goals towards working on X, Y, and Z, right? So what I always recommend is answer it with what it is, be grateful for your experience, and then focus it on why this position that you're talking to the recruiter about now is actually a perfect alignment for what you are looking for now. Some flags that I like to advise people to stay away from is really talking about growth. Now, it's okay to want growth in your career, absolutely. But if you're too gung ho and focused on growing and advancing away from the position that you are interviewing for now, it could be something where some recruiters might not move you forward. It costs nearly $15,000 to replace someone in their position, right? So recruiting is a very high cost center within an organization, right? So it usually is anywhere between 15,000 to 1.5 times someone's salary to replace someone, depending on how long it takes. And so when a recruiter is thinking about taking a candidate and moving them forward to the hiring manager, when they hear from that candidate, what are you looking for in your next role? I'm looking for a role where I can leverage that role to advance to the next step. All that recruiter is hearing is, I'm going to be recruiting for this role within the next 6 months to a year, right? So what they're really looking for is someone who's going to love the role that they're interviewing for and maybe stay and grow within that role and be impactful in that role. So it's okay for you to want growth in your career. Absolutely, right? But what that recruiter is looking for is, and hearing is, oh my gosh, I'm going to be right where I am again in 6 months to a year. I want someone who's going to stay so I can focus on other things, right? So what I would say instead is, hey, that's a really great question. What I'm really looking for is to grow my skill set professionally in a role like this at a company like this. From what I'm looking at on your company website, what I'm hearing from you, you all are in a growth mode. And from what I'm also seeing is that my skill set looks like it's a great match, while also in this role, it allows me some flexibility to learn new things and implement my skills and experience in a growth mindset way to tackle new projects in this role and work cross-functionally, which is something that I'm looking for, right? So now you've mentioned growth, but you're not mentioning, I want to take my boss's job, right? So that's something that I would keep in mind when you are answering that question. The final question that I want to talk about is going to be that dreaded salary question. What's your salary expectations? Ooh, this is the scary one. What I always like to advise people is to try and get the salary range from the recruiter first. And almost 8 times out of 10, it works, right? And here's the reason why. I like to use the analogy of going in and buying a car, right? When you go in and buy a car, maybe you have a set budget, right? Let's just use a round number. I'm going to go in and I'm only spending $20,000 on a car. That's it. But then you go in and you ride the car and you take it for a test drive and you see the sunroof and the heated seats. Oh, it feels so good. And then you talk to the sales guy and you're like, well, what's an extra 5,000, right? Well, the problem is that until you talk to that hiring manager and get them to fall in love with you and really find out what the true challenges and goals of that role are, it's really hard for them to fall in love with you and test drive, right? By having that conversation. So, negotiating at that very first conversation, right, with the recruiter is going to be very difficult. But I also understand that you want to be on the same page. So, what I always recommend is trying and turning that conversation or that question back on that recruiter and getting the range that's budgeted for the role. So, the recruiter might say, hey, just one final question. What's the salary? What's your salary expectations? And from there, what I always advise people is I say, hey, that's a really great question. It's hard for me to give a range without speaking to the hiring manager and learning more about what they're looking for in this role. Could you tell me the range that you have budgeted for this position? And 8 times out of 10, they give you the range. And from there, you can say, it looks like we're in the same page or on the same page. I'd love to have that conversation with the hiring manager, and we can circle back and find a win-win solution if it's a mutually beneficial fit. This is now not giving away your side, it's not playing your cards, and it is again focused on that alignment and finding that mutually beneficial fit. Now, if that recruiter pushes back and say, well, I really need to have your expectations, what I would say again is, hey, I completely understand, but I would really love to have that conversation with that hiring manager and find out again what they're really looking for and determine if this is a mutually beneficial fit for both of us before we have that conversation. Could we circle back after that hiring manager conversation to discuss both of our ranges from there? And that's absolutely okay for you to say. Now, if they push a third time, then I would make sure that you do have a range in mind that you can pull from your back pocket just in case. But most of the time, you're going to get that from there. Okay, now it's your turn to ask some meaningful questions. We really want to make sure that these questions are going to help give you information that you can use either in next interviews or just for your personal information for the hiring process, right? But also not waste your questions on things that the recruiter might not know. So, for instance, you might have the job description and you might want to know, well, what are the goals or what is the 90-day plan, et cetera, all that other stuff. But they might not know, right? That's going to be a question better for the hiring manager. But questions that you might want to ask the recruiter might fall in line with the company, the vision of the company, the growth of the company, and the team dynamics. So some questions that you might want to ask are going to be, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the leader of this department and his leadership style? Or can you tell me about the org chart of the division or the department? And can you tell me who this role would be collaborating with? That's absolutely fine. The other question that I would definitely ask when it comes to the company culture is showcasing that you did a little bit of research. It could and making it a little personal. You're talking to another human, right? And so when you can make things a little bit personal, it's going to go a long way because you're intentionally showing that you put in some effort for that individual. So you might want to say, hey, I did some research on the company. I see that they value innovation and creativity, for example. I also saw that you've been there for about 3 years now. I'd love to hear from you. What does innovation and creativity mean when it comes to the company culture, specifically to you? Now you can hear how the company culture is threaded throughout the organization. Now you're getting a taste of it in one department, and you're going to get a taste of it when you go and talk to the hiring manager. Also, because you made it a little bit personal, you're getting that recruiter on your side, and you're building an advocate throughout this journey, right? A lot of times people view recruiters as an obstacle they just have to hop over, but now you're building this relationship and you're making it personal, right? If you don't want to make it too personal, you could just say, hey, tell me a little bit about the company culture. I see that you value X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me what the company culture means to you? And that's fine too. The other thing that you can say is, hey, I did a little bit of research on the company. I see that you guys are in a growth mode. What does that mean for the company when it comes to hiring or advancing or growing or whatever, right? So really asking about the company's goals, the company culture, and a little bit about the organization of the team would be really, really great questions to ask. There are going to be some final questions, and we're going to be doing another video later in this month about wrapping up interviews and really making sure that you're overcoming objections and nailing that next step. But what I would highly recommend that you ask in a recruiter interview is, can you tell me a little bit about what the hiring process looks like? Who will I be meeting and what are the next steps? Absolutely make sure that you ask this so that you know what you're in store for. Is it going to be a really long wait? Am I going to be hearing from you at the end of this week? Am I going to be hearing from you in multiple weeks? And it's okay to say, okay, great. If I don't hear from you by the time that you've already said, is it okay for me to follow up? Right now, you're building that relationship and you're securing an advocate within that organization with a good communication back and forth that you can carry on into email or phone that you can use to follow up should the hiring process go a little bit long. Finally, the last thing that I want to make sure that you are doing is staying tuned to this channel, because we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks a video on overcoming objections. Now, recruiters, they're going to potentially bring up things that they object to in your resume, such as you don't have this software, or you don't have this experience, you don't have the skills. And overcoming objections in that recruiter interview confidently, calmly, and professionally is really going to help you overcome any, like I said, objections or hesitancy that they have in order to move you forward into that hiring manager stage. But remember that this interview is a conversation. It's a two-way street. And so my biggest piece of advice and my takeaway here is for you to approach it with confidence, be prepared with research, have your own questions, and help gather information about the company as a whole, because the next step is going to be that hiring manager one, and you're going to be learning more about that department. So this is a great opportunity to learn more about the company from your recruiter and to build that advocacy within that organization. The more that you can reframe away from a recruiter being an obstacle and instead frame it as a recruiter being an opportunity to learn and to shine, for you to be that perfect candidate for that role, or to really learn whether or not it's a good fit for you, is going to help you outshine your competition. Check out yesterday's podcast with Jack and I so that you can learn more about how to get onto these recruiter screens, and stay tuned and subscribe for next week when we go over more types of interviews, such as hiring manager interviews, panel, and we want to make sure that you're prepared for your next interview. Have a great rest of your day, and leave me in the comments a little bit about your upcoming interviews and any questions that you have so I can come back and help you out.